Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today I'm talking about the top 25 good, bad video games. These are video games that people collectively, for whatever reason, say are rubbish when they're actually not. They're actually good games, and people just are not understanding what's so great about them. Or, James Rolfe said they were bad, so people just repeat, what they hear. So let's start with the first good bad video game. Number 25 is Street Fighter, the movie, the game. This is based on the movie, based on Street Fighter 2. This is the game with Jean-Claude Van Damme playing as, I believe was he Guile in that movie? Anyways, it's a fun video game. It's not a great video game, but it's a lot more fun than people give it credit for. Yeah, it's kind of a Mortal Kombat knockoff in a roundabout way because of the digitized graphics. But that was kind of necessary at the time because that was the technology they had. Number 24, I hear a lot of people hate this game for whatever reason. Now it's coming, or people are coming around to it and starting to realize it's actually great. But again, James Rolfe shat on this game, so people were like, yeah, the game sucks for a long time. And it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES. Not the Turtles 2 based on the arcade game, and not Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project. Specifically the one that was made for the NES. Now, the common complaint people have with this game, one, is it's too hard, which it is. It's NES hard, which is a thing, but people are forgiving of other NES hard games. So calling it a bad game because it's hard, to me, gets a middle finger. You're stupid if you don't like it because it's hard, because all NES games are hard. They're supposed to be. That's just the fucking thing. The other complaint this game gets is it doesn't have a lot of references to the cartoon or the Turtles stuff, but it does. It's got references to the comic books, and it pulls in stuff from the cartoon just to make cartoon fans happy. But it's more based on the comic book, which a lot of people don't like for whatever reason, and I'm okay with it. Number 23 is Double Dragon for the NES. Now, a lot of people shit on this as a bad port of Double Dragon. It's not a 100% faithful arcade port, pixel by pixel, frame by frame, but it doesn't have to be. Games weren't expected to be that back in the day. So modern kids today, modern gamers, play their game. They play emulators, the actual arcade emulators. And so when they see an NES game or a Super Nintendo game that doesn't quite stack up to the arcade faithfully, they shit on it because like, oh, it's nothing like the arcade. It sucks. But back in the day, we didn't care. We were just happy to have the game, and we were fine with it because it was a faithful port to the arcade. The graphics aren't identical, but they're definitely not rubbish. They're good enough. It still looks like the game. The levels look the same. The characters look the same. The gameplay is the same. So why do people hate this game? I don't know. I think it's a fun game. Number 22 is Mighty Number 9. This one gets a bad rep because it's made by the creator of Mega Man, and it's supposed to play like Mega Man, but it doesn't. And people shit on it because they just wanted a Mega Man game, but he couldn't make a Mega Man game because he didn't have the rights. Mighty Number 9 gets a lot of unfair criticism because people expected it to be something it wasn't. But that's not what it is. It's just a fun action game. And if you play it as a fun action game, not expecting it to be a proper Mega Man game, which it isn't, then it's more fun than you let on. Number 21 is Street Fighter 2010 for the NES. This is another one that gets a lot of unfair um, criticisms, courtesy of James Rolfe. Again, because it's too hard, and because the complaint is that it has nothing to do with the Street Fighter games, and it's too sci-fi. But you have to remember, when this game came out, we didn't have Street Fighter 2 yet. It didn't exist. We just had the first Street Fighter, which there was no story. It was just one on one. It was literally two fighters. It was Ken versus Ryu. There were no other fighters. That was it. That was the whole goddamn game. That game sucked. Everybody knows that. So having an action platformer based on the Street Fighter property when there was no established lore yet, it's unfair to criticize that game when there wasn't an established lore because it doesn't have to follow the lore that came later because that stuff came later. So it's a perfectly fine game. It's a good NES action game. And I enjoy it. I had it as a kid and I liked it. Is it hard? Hella hard. But it's not harder than Batman or Battletoads, and people love those two fucking games. So get off your high horse, goddammit. Number 20 is a Sega CD game that really pisses me off that people shit on it. It's Make My Video. This is actually a series of games. There's Make My Video, CNC Music Factory, Inks, and then there's all or INXS. I don't know how you say it. And then there's also Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. These are fun games. They're a time capsule of the '90s dance culture, music, video, MTV culture. This was a big thing in the '90s. MTV ruled the world, and we were in love with, enamored by MTV. We were obsessed with it, probably hypnotized by it if you want to go that route. You know, we were into MTV, and this game brought MTV to your living room on the Sega CD. What's not to love? I don't understand why people don't like this game. Number 19 is a game I will admit is not great, but it's not as bad as people say. It's still fun to play. A lot of people criticize the home console ports as not faithful enough to the arcade, even though the arcade itself wasn't fantabulous. But the SNES and Genesis ports are passable. They're playable. There was, I think, also a 3DO port, but you know, who the fuck had the money for a 3DO? Not me. I'm still trying to get a 3DO to this day, and I don't think I'll ever get one. But whatever. The game is called Rise of the Robots. It's a early proto 3D fighting game. I say proto 3D because it does not use. I mean, it does. It doesn't really use polygon graphics. It does kind of use CGI type polygon looking graphics, but I think it's more vectors than anything. But I'm not 100% how it works. But it doesn't look good, and that's what people complain about it. Is it doesn't look good and the fighting isn't great. Fair enough, but in 90 what 2 or 3 when this game came out, it was mind blowing. The graphics were amazing. You know, a little bit better in the arcade. The Super Nintendo version probably being the better of the two 16-bit ports. The Genesis port doesn't look great. The 3DO port, I've never played it, but I've seen videos of it. It looks pretty good, pretty faithful to the arcade. But I don't get why people hate Rise of the Robots. It's a fun game. Number 18 was on the NES and the Super NES, which was very rare. It's Mario is Missing. This is an edutainment game, and it gets a shit on because it's an edutainment game, but it's actually kind of fun. You get to play as Luigi for a chance instead of Mario. And yeah, you have to solve puzzles and stuff, but people are okay with doing that in Zelda. They're okay with doing that in Where's Waldo, or Where in the Wherever is Carmen Sandiego. So yeah, why is that okay, but this game isn't? Speaking of Waldo, number 17 is Where's Waldo for the NES. This game gets shit on because the graphics are rubbish and it's hard to find Waldo. But that's the point. Waldo, it's not supposed to be easy to find Waldo. That's literally the point. If you're expecting it to be easy to find Waldo, you've never read a Where's Waldo book. You're not supposed to just point. You're not supposed to just open the book and say, there he is. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to find him. That's the whole goddamn point of the game. So I don't understand why this game gets shit on. Number 16 is a Sega CD gem that I fucking love. One of my favorite games for the Sega CD. Could possibly be one of the best games on the Sega CD. Probably not the best game, but it's a damn good game. And it also gets unfairly shit on because it's a CGI kind of FMV game. And this game is called Sewer Shark. And I'm just here to tell you the game is fucking hella fun. Yes, the graphics are dated by today's standards, but they were fucking cutting edge, mind blowing when this game came out. And people have to remember that. You have to remember that at the time this game came out, we were just in love with FMV games because they were so mind blowing. And this is one of the better ones. Number 15 is infamous for a lot of reasons, um, because it is hard to play if you don't know, what you're supposed to do. It's kind of cryptic, but if you know what you're supposed to do and you figure it out, again, puzzle solving, it's easy to get through. And it's also controversial because it helped launch the ESRB because it was one of the games that triggered the congressional investigations. It's another Sega CD game. It has been revived in modern times. It's called Night Trap. It it's not a bad game. It's not a great game, but it's not a bad game. It's still perfectly fine. Number 14 is another NES game that gets shit on because again it's uh, too hard, even though games that are harder than this are okay. The graphics are fine. The music is good. It's based on a popular comic book character, so people love it, should love it. But for whatever reason, they don't because it's too hard. I can't beat it. Well, you don't have to beat it. Just play it. Just have fun, And if you're gonna die 100 times, just enjoy it because you're gonna die 100 times in Mega Man and you like Mega Man. So what the fuck? The game is called Silver Surfer. And I think it's a fun game. Again, I had this game as a kid. It was a rental. I didn't own it. But I played it and it was perfectly fine. Number 13 is another comic book game on the NES that gets shit on. Now, I'll admit the graphics of this game are not great, but they're fine for the NES. And I'll admit that the top down perspective is wonky, but later X-Men games in the video game universe were top down, like the games on the Super Nintendo, or excuse me, the PS2 and the GameCube. The X-Men Legends games were top down games, and those were okay. Again, the game is hard. It's NES hard, but it's not too hard. It's fun to play. You can get through it if you put in the time. And the X-Men characters do look like X-Men characters, and they do have their signature powers. The music is okay, so I don't understand the criticism of this game. I think it's a fun game. It's not an A+ game. I put it as a C+, which is fine. It's not a D or an F like people say it is. Number 12 is another game that confuddles me why people don't like it. I loved it. I had a blast playing this game, and I had no problem with it. I didn't run into glitches. I didn't run into falling off the fucking, you know, falling off the fucking screen. So I guess you're playing it wrong. If you're fucking glitching the game because you're falling off the screen or whatever, you're fucking playing it wrong. And I don't know what to tell you. It's Sonic 2006 for the Xbox 360 and the PS3. I had a fun time playing this game. It plays like a proper 3D Sonic game. It feels like a true successor to Sonic Adventure, which people criticize Sonic Adventure to also as well. So I don't understand that. I think it's because gamers who didn't grow up with Sega don't know how to play Sonic games. And I believe it's because they think Sonic games are Mario games. So they go into it trying to play it like a Mario game. It's not Mario. Sonic is not Mario. Stop playing Sonic games like they're Mario games. They're not. They're Sonic games. They're completely different than Mario. They are not platformers. They're action games. It's all about the speed. The way you play the game is you get on the pipe and you run. You don't try to platform. You don't jump. You don't break bricks. You don't collect. I mean, you can collect rings and things, but that's not the goal of the game. The goal of the game is to get to the end of the level as fast as you can while beating up badniks along the way. It's an action game. It's not a platformer. Stop playing it like a platformer and play it like an action game, and you won't have nothing to bitch about. All right? So shut the fuck up. And if your game's glitching out, then maybe you have a problem. Maybe your system is dirty or something. I don't know, because it never glitched out for me. Not once. So I don't know where people are coming up with this shit. Number 11 is a great fucking game. I would call this an A+ game, and a lot of people would put it in the C minus camp. But those people are, again, weirdos, I guess. This is Sonic 3D Blast. There's a Genesis version, there's a PC version, and there's a Saturn version. They're all good. The Saturn version's the best. The PC version takes some things from the Saturn version and some things from the Genesis version, so it's kind of like a hodgepodge. The PC version is playable, but not great. The Genesis version is fun. It's perfectly fine. I would have preferred it to be a 32X game. It should have been a 32X game because it came out after the 32X did, and it was on the Saturn. So it definitely should have been a 32X game. And if it had been a 32X game, it would have been the best game on the 32X. And a proper Sonic game on the 32X instead of what we got, which, fuck that game, I do not like it. Knuckles Chaotix can suck my girl dick. Number 10 is another fighting game that gets shat on because, it's got the digitized graphics like Mortal Kombat. And it's hard. It is, but a lot of fighting games are hard. And again, I don't get why one game being hard equals good and another game being hard equals bad. I don't understand the arbitrary um, line people draw of what's acceptable bad or hard and what's not acceptable hard. I don't get it because the game's not as hard as you think it is. You got to learn the combos just like any other fighting game, but once you do, play it. It's fun. The game's called Shaq Fu. It's got a lot of interesting comic book style graphics and comic book style art and characters, and it's a fun game. Number 9 is a game that I heard people shit on my whole life, and fortunately, uh, when it came time for James Rolfe to review this game, he actually gave it a good review, so I'll give him credit for that. He didn't shit on it because he was like me, confuddled as to why people didn't like it. This is Zelda 2 on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. NES, not NES. Stop saying NES, goddammit. Pisses me off. Nobody ever called it the NES back in the day. We called it the NES or the Nintendo. Call it the Nintendo. People know what you're talking about. You don't have to specify. People know Nintendo means NES. Super Nintendo, duh, means Super Nintendo. The 64 means the N64. You know what I mean? People are stupid. You don't have to be that goddamn specific. Anyways, this is a great fucking game. It's a solid sequel to the original Zelda. And again, the formula hadn't been established yet because this was literally the first sequel. So you can't say it plays nothing like a proper Zelda game because at the time there was no such thing as a proper Zelda game. It didn't have to play like all the other games because they didn't exist yet. And it was a fun fucking game. Number 8 is a game that I will give people credit, at least on the console it was released on sucks. And the controller you're playing it with is a piece of shit. But if you can get a good gamepad, which they do exist on the console, you don't have to use the default gamepad. It's actually fun and playable if you have the proper gamepad. If you're trying to play it with a remote, no, it's not. It's not as fun. The game is Hotel Mario for the CDI. I had this game when I had a CDI, and I fucking loved it. It's fun. It's a Mario game. It's just like Donkey Kong or Wrecking Crew, you know? It's that type of game. It's just a simple, fun game. I don't understand why I played it. Number 7 is Bubsy 3D on the PlayStation. Now, I give this game a pass because it was an early 3D platformer on a console that hadn't been established yet. People hadn't really figured out how to make good PlayStation games yet. The game is a solid 3D platformer. The platforming is okay. You know, it's got, you know, passable, decent music for the time. Um, Good graphics for the time. It was not mind blowing like Super Mario 64, but I'm pretty sure this game came out before Super Mario 64, and even if it didn't, even if it came after, it doesn't matter because they still didn't have a lot of 3D platformers on the PlayStation yet because the genre hadn't really been established. Now, is Bubsy 3D a fucking A plus game? No, I'd say C minus. So it's not great, but it's not as bad as people say it is. It's still playable. Number 6 is a game I've never played, but I've seen YouTube videos of. Now, I take that back. I have played it, but I've never played it on true hardware. I've only played the emulator, the ROM. But it is fun. And I think it's a Mortal Kombat knockoff for the 3DO. It's called Way of the Warrior. This is a B movie video game. It's supposed to be a B movie video game. It's not supposed to be a AAA title. It delivers exactly what it promised. It's a B movie in video game form. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love good Kung Fu B movies. They're fucking awesome. Number 5 is another game that people shit on because of the story behind it, which they get the facts wrong. They over exaggerate what really happened. But when you tell people what really happened, it's not as fun as the sensational myth that is way blown out of proportion. The game is called Pac-Man, and it's for the Atari 2600. Um, at the time when Pac-Man came out, yes, people were upset that it didn't look like the arcade game. I was as well. But they weren't as upset as people say they are. People still bought the game, they still played it. The game still sold really well. The whole thing about the landfill and everything isn't because the game didn't sell well. It's because They expected it to sell better than it did, and so they made more copies of the game than they should have. They made more copies of the game than there were consoles available because they expected people to buy the system to play the game. The same thing happened with another game on this list, which we'll get to, which did help facilitate the video game crash, but it's not as big of a deal as people an impact as people make it out to be. People are like, "Oh my god, the game was so bad that it caused the video game crash." That's not true. That's not true at all. The game plays like Pac-Man. It's a single screen game. You have a maze. The maze looks the same. The ghosts look the same. Pac-Man looks the same. Now, the colors are off because the console couldn't do the colors. The sound is mostly the same. It's a little bit different, but it's close enough. And yes, you have square pellets instead of round pellets, but that's again a limitation of the hardware. But if you just take all that away and you just look at it as what it is, it's a decent home console port of Pac-Man for the time. If you look at other arcade games that were released at the time, like Asteroids, Moon Patrol, um, Donkey Kong, Mario Brothers, Centipede, uh, Space Invaders, none of them look like the arcade game. None of them do. So why are those games okay, but this one is not? I don't understand it. It looks like a decent port of Pac-Man. I had fun playing this game. It was the Pac-Man I grew up with. I played more Pac-Man on Atari than I did the arcade game. So I don't know, whatever. Number 4 was on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Or no, the Sega Genesis and the NES. Excuse me, I messed that up. This is Battletoads. Now, this game does have a cult following, so it does have its fans. But the larger gaming audience likes to say things like, oh, it's actually not a good game, or it's a bad game people like, or whatever. But it's not a bad game, it's a fun game. Is it hella hard? Yes, Battletoads is hella hard. Again, it's NES hard. It's still playable. It's still got great graphics, great music, great action. It's a good platformer beat 'em up with some sci-fi action elements. It's a perfectly good game. I don't understand why people don't like it. Number 3 is another licensed game. I don't know if this was LJN or not, but I don't care if it was or not because they made good games and they got unfairly shit on by James Rolfe again, who doesn't know how to fucking play video games, so fuck off. I hate AVGN. He's a dipshit. So fuck him. This is Back to the Future 2 and 3 on the NES. This is a good, fun, solid 2D platformer. It's also got puzzle elements. Again, people criticize this game because it's cryptic and the puzzles are hard to solve. But again, it's like other video games that are cryptic and the puzzles are hard to solve are okay, but this game isn't, so fuck off. This is a fun game. It's got good graphics, good music, good gameplay. There's no reason to shit on this game. None at all. Number 2 is a game that gets unfairly criticized because it's 290s and it came out in the mid 2000s. The game got delayed by a fucking decade, so what the hell do you expect? You know? The game is called Duke Nukem Forever for the PS3. It might have been on the Xbox 360 and PC, but I don't know. I only had it on the PS3, and I'm here to tell you, it's Duke Nukem. What do you want? What were you expecting? This wasn't gonna be Call of Duty. It wasn't gonna be Halo. It's literally fucking Duke Nukem. If you went into this game expecting Halo or Call of Duty, that's on you. That's your fault. That's your fuck up. This game is Duke fucking Nukem. It's supposed to be cheesy. It's supposed to be stupid. It's a fucking B movie in video game form. What were you expecting? It's not a blockbuster game. It was never meant to be a blockbuster game. It's a B movie game. It's an indie B movie game. That's what it is. That's what it was supposed to be. Shut the fuck up and just play it like it is. Or, you know what? Just admit you don't like B movies and move on. It's not supposed to be Doom or Quake or Unreal. It isn't. And it never was. The original Duke Nukem 3D was the same thing. People shit on it for the same reason because it's not Quake, it's not Doom, it's not Wolfenstein. No, it's not supposed to be. And yes, some of the humor is dated, I'll admit that. But the game was supposed to come out in the 90s and it got delayed by a decade. So you have to look at it in the historical context and enjoy it for what it is. Now, I'll probably do a whole video on ET for the Atari, and I've already done a whole video on the video game Crash that everybody gets fucking wrong because the myth has been blown up out of proportion, and people make it out like it was bigger than it was, or the cause of it was this one game, which it wasn't. ET for the Atari 2600 is the best good bad video game because it's not a bad video game at all. It's actually a good video game. ET looks like ET. You know, the town doesn't really look much like a town, but that's the limitations of the hardware. If you play adventure and you can accept that the dot is the player and the Lego blocks in the background are a castle and a couple of squiggy lines are a dragon, then why can't you accept this game? I guess. Is it cryptic? Yeah, but all Atari games were. You have to read the goddamn instruction manual. People criticize this game because they didn't, today they criticize it because they don't have access to the instruction manual. So they don't know what they're supposed to do because, well, the game doesn't tell you what to do. No shit, it's an Atari game. It can't tell you what to do. It's the limitations of the hardware. You have to have the instruction book. That's true of literally every game available ever for the Atari. Now, some games are more obvious because they're ports of the arcade game, which you've already played, so you can kind of figure out how to play them. Other games like Combat or, Haunted House don't make sense unless you've read the instruction book. Again, Combat people love, Haunted House people revere, E.T. people hate. I mean, what the fuck did you expect from a video game on a fucking Atari 2600? It's if you have the instruction book and you know how to play the game, it's not hard. And it's not as cryptic as people say it is. It's literally just, collect the things in the correct order and then go to the place. It's not that hard at all. Is it frustrating? Yes. Is it more frustrating than Mega Man 2? No. Mega Man 2 is fucking hella hard. But hey, people will love Mega Man because whatever, and hate ET because I don't know. I guess they just don't know fucking how to play video games, I guess. They don't know how to read. Read the goddamn instruction book. Jesus Christ. It's not that goddamn fucking complicated.